We are now all set to bring to you our first panel discussion of the day, where we'll be having experts from across industries really showcasing and sharing their experiences with all of you right here. Our first panel discussion will be really about talent at the top, steering digital transformation, driving growth and restructuring business. Our format is going to be very, very simple. After about 45 minutes of discussion time with our moderator really weaving it all together, we will have the last 10 minutes for an open house with all of you. So I'd like to encourage all of you to please ask questions, because this really is the time for us to connect with all of you and make it a very, very interactive session. So let us all look forward to the spectacular panel discussion that we're about to present to you. May I extend a very warm welcome to our expert panelists joining us. Please put your hands together for Mr. Anil Salvi, Managing Director and Group Head, Human Resources, JM Financial. We thank you, sir, for joining us. May I also present to you Mr. K.N. Murali, Vice President, Human Resources and Administration, NTT. Please put your hands together as I extend a very warm welcome to Ms. Ruhie Pande, Chief Human Resources Officer, Godrej Housing Finance and Godrej Fund Management. Please put your hands together as I extend a very warm welcome to Mr. Sumit, Neogi, HR Director, South Asia, Middle East and Africa, the Lubrizol Corporation. And may I request the kind presence of our moderator, Mr. David Madhu, Associate Director, KPMG. May I please welcome all of you to join us here on stage. And once again, to our audience members, let's make this a very, very interactive discussion with all of you joining in the Q&A segment. Thank you, and may I present to you and hand over the segment to our moderator, Mr. David Madhu.
The lights on my eyes, which are not doing fine for some time.
Thank you. Check. Are we good? Okay, good morning. Am I loud and clear? Cool, nice, good to know that. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I was eagerly waiting for something like this to happen, and such a pleasure to be part of this panel, and moderating it in itself is as you know, in corporate terms, it's a big achievement. So that's how I see it personally. But let's, moving into the topic as such, and I thought, the COVID has changed lives. It has changed a lot for all of us. Now, on those similar lines, it has changed the way the corporate world has also worked. We had been hearing different kinds of work models, hybrid work model, work from home, work from anywhere, work anywhere under the sun. So these are the different kinds of things that we had been hearing. But what also fascinates me to know is that how it is across. Me as an employee of KPMG, I do get all those benefits. I was getting that before the pandemic as well. But is it the same across all industries? Is it the same across all sectors? I would like to invite Ruhie to share her thoughts on it. Considering that from the real estate standpoint, we certainly can't have our construction managers working from home when the actual work needs to be done on the site. So Ruhie, your thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. First of all, very warm welcome to all of you, and love the launch of the CXO Moves report, plus the 2 sessions which I was fortunate enough to attend. So some amazing thoughts by both the speakers. Interesting question there, David, because strangely, real estate traditionally has all been about location, location, location. So COVID coming in and disrupting that entire core, saying location's not really important, was amazing. The move to the hybrid or a fully work from home in a traditional sector by real estate is very slow. A lot of that is because of the fact that the way the work is designed is a lot on site. For example, you're right. How much can you have construction managers? How much can you have site engineers actually be working from home when the lot of work is actually happening on the sites? But a lot of that work is not moving to work from home also due to the slowness and the change of mindsets. So during the pandemic, there was of course a total ban on how much movement could happen on the traditional sites, and we saw that there were a lot of roles which became hybrid, there were a lot of roles which became hot desking, and I think it is also an opportunity for organizations to ascertain how many of their workers can actually be working from home, also saving costs for themselves, you know, how much of infrastructure is really needed, how much hot desking can be done. Now I'm saying that with a pinch of salt because one of the businesses I take care of HR for is taking care of commercial real estate assets. So saying that with a pinch of salt, but having said that, in the interest of being, you know, focused a lot on welfare of employees, how much can we really be doing, you know, on site, and how much can we be doing of work from home? COVID ended. All of us have now jumped back to what comes very naturally to us, at least in the real estate sector, saying let's go back to work. But there are organizations who continue to have majority of their work from home. I think a lot more of studies need to be done. We haven't really figured it out, but we've not gone totally back to completely working on site. We're still experimenting a lot with flexibility and work from home model. Jury's still out. I think another year is when we'll see some more work.
Got it. I understand, sure. And on a similar note, I mean, I would like to invite, what are your thoughts on this hybrid model?
Yeah, first, again, thank you all for the opportunity to be here. Ours is a very different industry. We are in the IT sector. And for us, I think when COVID happened, everything changed literally overnight. I mean, we have, you know, we have about 4,000 people at that time as part of the organization, and a lot of them rendering critical services to clients across the country. And one fine day, we had to switch completely to work from home. And that in itself was a task, but being an IT organization was not an impossible task. But what happened in the process is that in the longer term, it forced us to think about what kind of an organization, what kind of options do we provide our people. So our definition of workplace has changed from what it used to be traditionally to a new definition of workplace. What it's also done as a result is that it's given employees a choice that they didn't have earlier. We too have, you know, now we've kind of gone down the path of saying that there will be certain roles, certain functions that will necessarily have to work from the office because of the nature of the work that they do. Then there are those that are clearly ones that can work comfortably out from home. And then there are those roles which typically will require a little bit of a hybrid. And where it is hybrid, the employee will decide and choose when they would want to come into the office and when they would want to work from home. But what it's also done, therefore, is made us think about making all the products, services, the technologies, the systems available in a very different form than it used to be earlier. And that, again, you know, comes with a lot of, you know, it requires a lot of thought in a world which is so vulnerable at this point in time, you know, security postures, making connectivity seamless without impacting the day-to-day work. I think that's something that it's forced us to think about. But equally importantly, it's also forced our leadership team and our managers to think about how you evaluate people when they're not really, I mean, we've been used to a world where people have associated performance to being in office, to being seen rather than on the outcomes that they deliver. And I think we have shifted away to a world where now outcomes are really the most important things. And that again requires not just the technology and the ability to measure those outcomes, but also to have a mindset change where people, particularly the older leadership, and I include myself in that category, it took a little bit of effort for us to come to terms with the fact that people can be productive, people can deliver on what is required, and you can measure, you can, you know, you can do this without necessarily having to bring them in. So I think it's just forced us to think about all of these things that we sort of didn't have to think about earlier. But I think it's inevitable now that that's going to be the way, at least in our industry, because it's also made it impossible for us to go out and hire if we didn't have this flexibility. People are expecting those sorts of options when you hire. I've had people, even in retaining talent, now we are struggling to bring people back into the office, even if we want them to, because they're saying, I have options outside. So I think these are some of the challenges that we've seen. It's still evolving. I don't know whether there's one view, one answer to this. It will vary from industry to industry. But in our industry, this is what we are seeing.
But thank you so much for bringing that aspect of bringing people to office is becoming a big challenge for us these days. I mean, it's about more than bringing them to office. A lot of team members have started questioning, how is my productivity going down when I'm staying home? That's another way of team defending themselves. There were times when the feedback was one way, now it has become two-way, and leaders are also getting adapted to something like that. I mean, that I should be hearing it from my team members, I should be accommodated. Back then, there were days when there was a one-side story that I get a feedback which is difficult to handle and all the stuff. In these circumstances, getting people to office is a difficult thing. Anil, how would you handle that in your organization?
Well, I think, to be honest, I'm still struggling with the challenge and the issue. So, but here we are. We heard it, different strokes for different folks and different strokes for the same folks, right? And truly experiencing the same. My thought around work from home and people coming back to work is a bit different. I feel and I believe, I guess the approach cannot be identical across the industry or for that matter businesses. In my witness, I realized that the action is reflecting the client behavior. If you're in a business where a client himself is working from home, it's fine for you to work from home, right? But if you're dealing with an end client who is also in office, he's out and about, and then it is going to be difficult for you to be at home and try to have a business interaction with him. To give you an example, see, besides HR, I also look after something called a real estate consulting business, which is nothing but selling houses. So during pandemic, I have sold a lot of houses, showing people houses on a video call. So my sales guys would go to the development and the projects and the site, and side to side they will make a video call and show the properties or send the brochures. And people bought houses online in that sense. Now that was unheard of, right? People buying houses, seeing the development, etc. on the phone or on the video call. But that was possible because he didn't also want to come out of the house. He was comfortable and he didn't want to take risk of getting out, and he also wanted to buy. And we created that opportunity for him, that he can make there's an opportunity and he can take that decision. Now, I don't think there is anybody who would buy a house looking at a photo or a brochure or on a video call, because people are also out and about. Our people take them from project to project and buy. So whichever businesses that we are in, I think if you'll notice that the expectation of you, whether you are working from home or working from office, is going to reflect on the client behavior. Also, I have also noticed there are people who prefer to work from home, and there are people who prefer to work from office. So it's a complex kind of a matrix, and we need to find a kind of a right kind of a balance. People also talk about, I think we have gone through a pandemic, and it has been truly exceptional kind of situation, right? You go back to history of 100, 200 years, situations like these happen, and we typically go back to the same way, right? We have had pandemics, but I think where lives have been lost, the countries or the economies have been shut, and you realize, we have short memories, right? And the moment life goes around, see, all of us, I don't see anybody with the mask here today. We forget, right? And then we go back to the same ways. The only difference that has happened probably 50, 60, 100 years ago and now is the technology, right? Technology has been a major facilitator. We have a panel member who is from IT, where the client is probably invisible. You could probably work and be invisible yourself. What matters is the delivery. But there are situations when what matters is the relationship, hand-holding. And when that comes into a business, I think it is going to be very, very difficult for people to work from home. Ankit, who runs the human solution, he can't afford to work from home. He knocks doors, he meets people, he hands holds, and then take people across, right? I think and that's how that's what I think it is going to be very, very business led.
Got it. And I mean, it's an interesting point you made about the technology aspect of it. I mean, I would like to bring in Sumit to share his views on how things have changed, how the digital transformation has happened in your organization. How is that it helped the employee experience, and also at the same point, the client delivery is also not compromised. I mean, if you can throw some light on that.
Right. So in terms of, first of all, thank you for the inputs. Actually, it helps me to give a segue to the thoughts very clearly. The only difference between the pandemic of 1918 and 2019, I believe, the 100-year difference, I agree, is technology, and technology has ensured that the economy continues to run. Right? Otherwise, it would have been a 1930 repeat in 2030, right? The great downturn or slowdown, as they say. Now, what the pandemic has done, if we go back to 2020, when suddenly the lockdown was declared, the objectives of organizations were different. One thing that the pandemic has done, that most of the line managers have realized that you can indeed revise your objectives every 3 months. That's what has happened very clearly. I remember having read few reports, I don't know who, McKinsey or someone, who kept on publishing that 75% of employee wants to work from home, and the last report that is published that says 87% of employee want to come back to work. So, things have continued to change, so it will keep on evolving as we move forward. Our organization is a specialty chemical firm. We are part of a large group, Berkshire Hathaway. So there are certain principles, values which are very clearly mentioned. Our value was very clear: employee care. Employee comes first. We need to do what is the right thing to do. Certain set of our units are essential commodity, so we were able to operate very quickly. But we definitely ensured what is the minimum level of requirements which are there, to operate. If we have to operate at 50% or 60%, one, obviously there was a mandate that you cannot operate more than 50% or so to begin with. But when it was 100%, at that point of time also, there were very clear pandemic guidelines which were created within the setup. In terms of connect with the clientele, very clearly it was all digital. Suddenly we saw Microsoft Teams taking over the world in place of Skype. Teams, not that Teams was not there in the past, but the adoption became very, very quick, and it also evolved as a software. So in terms of policies, philosophies, we have a mixed policy, mixed philosophy, where we have people who are working in the unit, in the plant, who have to be there because the plant operations cannot be managed from home with appropriate pandemic guidelines. And then there are set of roles which can be operated from anywhere. So today we have a situation where some of our service function folks are operating from their home, from wherever they want to. That we have certain set of people. There are certain positions which can come to office on a required basis. We have not yet implemented that, okay, come back to office as 100%. I must also tell you that few observations that we had as leadership team is that set of people who joined during the pandemic and people who were working prior to, you can observe that there are two cultures which are getting created. Because it is said and it is practiced that you can smell the culture. The power of panel discussion, those who are listening to us versus those who would be listening to us on a YouTube or a video, there would be difference very clearly. One needs to accept it. So how can you assimilate this set of people into culture? Right? One of the elements which is famously being discussed is around moonlighting, right? And we had a practical issue. One of our IT team member who is supporting our global IS setup called us from Australia and said, "Oh, I am doing another job." Right. So I don't know how he landed in Australia at the first place, but these are practical issues which are there. There was another issue where an employee called up, said, 3 months into the pandemic, can you please give me special approval to work from office? Why? Because I stay in a 1-bedroom house, we are 6 of us, and I just cannot perform. So there are practical situations which have happened, and we have responded to the practical situations within the realms of guidelines which were laid down from time to time by the state and central government.
Thank you so much, Sumit, on that one. I would like to invite Murali on this and share his thought on the digital transformation. I mean, you're a hardcore IT person. I mean, how did that change in your organization?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about this outside the context of COVID. So this is something that, of course, is happening all over. If you look at digital transformation, it's a fairly loosely defined expression today. It can take its own form, shape, depending on which organization, which industry you are in. But what is common pretty much in all industry, irrespective of the industry, what it connotes is a marked increase in speed, in agility, in disruption, in rethinking everything that could have been an old established way of thinking, in redoing things, reimagining things. These are the common threads associated with digital transformation. Of course, all supported by technology in whatever shape and form that can be supported. But what a lot of organizations have struggled to keep pace with is getting people ready to adopt and change, keeping in line the digital transformation that organizations are going through. In our own organization, I mean, if I can give that as an example, we are in the business of providing solutions to our clients that will allow them to implement get outcomes faster, implement their vision for their clients for the future. And yet, when I look at our own teams, we still are not yet in our own mind selling the way that clients are expecting us to sell, delivering the way the clients are expecting us to deliver, because we're still steeped in the old ways of approaching things. And that's how people are used to doing it. And one of the things that we're struggling with is the fact that there is no ready-made solution outside. Every industry, every company in this industry is going through the same challenge. So if I were to go out and look, it's not going to be that easy. And yet if I look at people from within, it's going to take time to get them up to speed to be able to make that change happen. Change itself is a big thing. So what we're realizing is that organizational readiness to adopt and adapt to the changes that digital transformation brings is going to be an extremely important challenge that we will all grapple with. Now, if you take, in addition to this, if you look at the options that are available for people, choices that they have available to them, and the fact that we are living in a hyper-personalized world, there is, Mr. Tripathi said, there is no one-size-fits-all, and there is no one-size-fits-all. There is change, there is no one-size-fits-all. So we are looking at everything that we do with our employees as a hyper-personalized environment, hyper-personalized experience, whether it is on growth, whether it is on learning and development, whether it is on employee experience. Anything that we try to do that is, I mean, I could get the best course out there in the market available to somebody, let's say from Harvard. Unless it resonates with that individual, he's not going to do it. It's just an exercise in futility. So a lot of the efforts that we're putting in is to make sure that we get people to look at, I mean, we get to look at what an individual wants and make that available to that individual in a form he or she wants to consume it, and give that experience to that individual. We're also trying to see how we can get them to, given all the change, I think that people often feel a little lost. So how do you get them to get a sense of belonging, a sense of affiliation is again something that we are working on. But these are really some of the things that we are working on at this point in time. I mean, we've heard the word VUCA being used for many, many years. I think we're coming up on 30 plus years, but it's never been more relevant than it is today. And that's what pandemic has done, right? It's made it more volatile, it's made it more uncertain, made it more complex, and made it more ambiguous. And that's really what we are all struggling to deal with, and coming up with creative, innovative ways to bring the clarity that people are looking for and help people adapt and change.
Nice. Thank you so much for that one. I mean, we've discussed about hybrid work model. We have discussed about technology. How is our team reacting to it, and how is that we are managing the entire situation? Halfway into our conversation time, 45 minutes, which is given for us, I want to bring in Ruhie and ask her, what are the skill set that a leader requires to handle such things, and how did things change, and what are the new skills that we are ideally looking from a leader to handle such situations?
So I think I totally agree with Murali when he says that the biggest change is in getting people to adapt. So when you talk about a digital transformation, apart from the fact that you will go out there and get the best data lakes and get the latest technologies, which maybe you'll get a consultant in for, what are we really looking at getting transformed? It's the human beings in the organization. And thereby, when you look at digital leaders, I would say things like, their digital acumen, the hard skills are a given. You obviously will look at someone who understands this field. But the more important thing which digital era and digital workers and digital leaders would definitely need is, in my opinion, 3-4 things. One is the ability to have this long-term strategic roadmap. What are the choices? And that will be different, I think Murali was referring to it, that will be very different for each industry. So what are you going to give up? What will thereby move to a digital framework? Then of course getting the right technologies in. The third thing will be a very strong and a very clearly articulated change management plan. So when you're looking at digital skills, I think change, the ability to manage change, the ability to influence change, these leaders have to be agile and they have to be change makers. Having said that, once the change management plan is created, it's kind of launched, then what you're going to be looking at is, having done this for the business, for the outside world, what is your HR process all about? What are you recognizing? So are your leaders able to work alongside collaboratively? The word there is collaboration. The digital era has a very important skill of collaboration. No more are there heroes. The earlier era was all about saying, I'm very good as an individual contributor. I'm able to get X amount of business. This is the era of collaboration. This is the era of team workers. And that's easier said than done, because really getting leaders who have the org agenda in their mind and not really, and very secure in their own skin, I think that would be very important. So how is your reward and recognition policy talking to this digital transformation? What is the communication? This is the era of leaders who have to be high on strategy, but also very high on visibility. Are they visible? Are they talking constantly to people? What's kind of the communication plan? So I would say, starting from a very strategic orientation to being able to collaborate, work seamlessly as a team, then getting the right data, then getting the right processes. Last but not the least, a very high result orientation. Otherwise, this is all going to be in fab. We will say this is the era of the Uberized workforce. But when you go and really ask people in this room, what percentage of your workforce is actually Uberized? Not very sure what kind of answers you'll get. Maybe someone's really doing a great job. I still have to see them. So what is the result delivery? What are the KPIs? Are you able to measure them? I was reading somewhere that a lot of IT and infrastructure projects have a 70% likelihood of success. So 70% of what you started doing gets done. But when you talk about digital transformation, the success rate is much lesser, as less as even 20%. And a lot of that breakdown doesn't happen because you don't have the latest technology. It happens because of the skills we just spoke about. So those would be my 2 cents.
Thank you so much, Ruhie. And Sumit, would you like to add a point to the same?
Oh, absolutely. So actually, one thing that doesn't change about leadership are the competencies that are required irrespective of era. One of the key feature of a leadership continues to remain about being flexible and being nimble. Very high learning agility, that is the key. Now, how learning agility helps is to adapt the change with the change in technology, to know where what can one use, where can one use. Leader is someone who will continue, the expectation would be to be the role model. An element, however, which has been plaguing me for last few weeks, and I must submit this. In the era of digitization, you know, be it WhatsApp, be it social media, be it how much we know about each other and how much information we can gather, what is the privacy, you know, and that's something which a leader need to learn to respect. We don't have any privacy law, right? There is nothing legal which is mentioned. So all that would be always moralistic. Where should one stop? And that to me would be a key area that leaders would be required to focus in a digital world.
Got it. Thank you so much. And Anil, I would like to put forward this to you. I mean, we discussed about the skill sets that's required, and we also discussed around the kind of profiles that are evolving. Have you faced any situations where there is a dire situation of not finding a right leader in the system? I mean, give us some insights onto that.
Yeah, I'll just step back and probably add to the earlier discussion
Sure.
on the leadership. And Mr. Tripathi is not there. He talked about a boss being different than the leader, right? So I think boss and then leadership is kind of distinct. From my perspective also, I think leadership during the digital era has become much more profound and out there and visible, right? Thanks to the technology. It was never so visible and so much in life, and I don't think there was as much expectation that was sought from a leader as it was witnessed in last couple of years, especially during the pandemic. Because I think it was a territory which was unknown. People did not know how to react, how to respond, and how to operate, and that's where the leadership came to the fore. During earlier conversation, we were just talking, and all of a sudden, HR became very critical and important. It was always important. It became, very, very critical during last few years, and I just hope and pray it remains so. So I think the leadership has got a very different kind of an bearing today. Now, since you are so visible, so seen, so demonstrative, I think the ask from leader is going to be very, very different, and that's where I come to your point, the skill sets. I think communication is going to be very, very critical aspect of any leader. It always was, but it has a very, very different kind of a connotation now. Typically, you would see, in an economics, there is something called demonstration effect, and definition of the same is imitating superior consumption pattern. Generally, the people imitate the leaders, right? And those habits, over a period of time become the culture and the value. So leadership is the way I define is, on one hand, you would have responsibilities and accountabilities. That's what a leader is expected to deliver. And on other hand, you also have this thing of how is he delivering those accountabilities and responsibilities, and that's where you have a cultural orientation which comes into the play, and balancing between the two, right? And probably that determines the boss versus a leader, as long as you manage that how part in a right and appropriate manner, and that how issue and how thing of a leader is basically being now seen a lot today. How has the leader performed? How has the leader provided the leadership? Was he there? Was he clear? Was he ahead of time? Could he see the challenge which was going to come tomorrow, day after, and time to come? And if he couldn't see it and he was surprised himself, was he candid enough to say, oh, I missed this too, but let us fix this, and stuff like that. So I think the leadership, there have been leaders and there have been leaders, and the leaders who essentially demonstrated that initiative, that ability to deal with issue and challenge, that ability to find solution, have proven to be very, very successful. And in time to come, to answer your question, those are the skills which are going to be very, very, very critical to find, to retain, and even to hire.
Got it. I mean, adding to the point that you mentioned about leaders' behavior and everything, to be very honest, I've seen the personal side of my leaders. the way they react to things, which was not seen before. I mean, when they started writing to us, telling us these are tough times for us, how do they react when someone in the team is not well? We got very good accessibility to them. We started seeing like, okay, leaders are more like us only. I mean, they do react, they do have different kind of emotions, because earlier the situation was not such. I mean, it was a limited access that we would have. We would hear about the business goals and everything, and that's where it was stopping, but it certainly helped us. Now, coming back to Murali, I mean, would you fill these leadership roles with internal people? If yes, what would be the roadmap for it, and how would you do it?
Okay. I think for us, given the current circumstances, our preference would be to look for people from within the organization, to grow them, both as an opportunity for people from within the organization to grow. I think is always reflective of a positive cultural tone. But equally, if not more importantly, I think in volatile times, in times that are difficult as it's been for the last couple of years, I think an understanding of the nuances of the business, the understanding of nuances of the people angle would be very, very important. It takes time for people to settle in, is what we've realized, and we don't have the luxury of time. So where possible, look to hire, to grow people from within the organization. Having said that, I think there is merit in looking outside the organization, where we believe a fresh perspective that's being brought by somebody from outside the organization is going to allow us to overcome something that we are struggling with. Because I think very often we get set in doing things in a particular way, and sometimes it's important to shake that up, and that's something that we would certainly look to get from outside. Going back to the skill itself that you were talking about, right? I think today more than ever, the leader is somebody who can carry his team or her team along the journey, which is going to be a fairly difficult journey. So that ability to empathize, that ability to get your team to rally behind you, around you, to be seen as somebody who is, when required, willing to roll up your sleeves to get into the trenches if it were. All of these are qualities that are important today for a leader to exhibit. It sounds cliche, but I think today one of the most important things is to communicate, and you can never over communicate. And it's a skill that unfortunately does not always come naturally to people. It's not something that people always think of it as important. So we would look for leaders who've got that ability to communicate and relate with the people that are in the organization. I think it's going to be crucial. And I think to Anil's point, the ability to look ahead, to be able to see what's coming in the future and be able to prepare yourself to that future, I think is also going to be an important element. But your question to me, I think we would look at a little bit of a mix, leaning a little bit more towards internal growth than external. That would be our preference.
Nice. Got it. I come back to Ruhie. You yourself have moved within the within the divisions in your organization. In addition to what I've put forward around, would you be giving people internally for an opportunity? How about the cross sector also? How will that work? I mean, how were you successful?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think I'm myself a product of cross sector movement. So I was taking care of HR for our properties business, and then currently I handled our financial services, and that was also a startup. And also I'm handling our commercial real estate and private equity fund management business. So definitely, I think these days it isn't really a choice, because post the great resignation, there is a genuine dearth, especially at middle to senior management and the top management in terms of the leadership quotient. I also feel cross-sector movements add a lot of innovation. The kind of Mostly when you see that if there's a challenge within a particular sector, the disruption is always somehow or the other from another sector. Secondly, sectors which are into, there's a lot of fintechs, there are a lot of large product technology companies which have got created, which really can't be defined to one sector. So they are far more open with getting skills or getting leadership from across sector. I also think that there's an opportunity to add a lot more diversity. And when I say diversity, I also mean just not in the way of thought, but also in the opportunity of getting more women. Traditionally, the BFSI sector has not got a lot of women leaders, and as an organization, we genuinely want that. Now, how are you going to create it? So we've seen that if you're able to identify some core competencies and see where are the opportunities in an organization where you can go outside and where you can get folks from cross-fungible sectors. The only couple of things, the caveats I'd put on the table is when we're hiring such people, just try and see what is the balance between the hard and the soft skills. Are some things which are negotiable, which can be let go of, and thereby you can pick people from cross sectors. Secondly, when you're hiring that individual, what's the learning agility of that person? What's the openness to change of that individual? If a person's been very successful within the same industry, then are you really being very fair? So if you're able to look at a lot of these factors, I definitely would encourage, and I myself seen huge amount of success with that.
Nice, good. Sumit, from your standpoint, what would you like to add on this?
Right, so I'll start with this, that, the firm that I am with, Berkshire, it's a Berkshire Hathaway firm, and the one way of growth, and actually the way of growth is acquisition. Right. So inorganically, the organization continues to grow, and that's the philosophy, and that's the talent philosophy as well. Any opportunity comes up, if there are people within, it goes to them, even if they are 70 to 80% ready. But we don't have any, such hard and fast rule that, okay, the person has to come from within. It can be from outside, and we have a lot of tolerance, a lot of acceptability of ideas which are coming in from outside, and innovation, creativity, these are certain principles that drive the organization.
Nice. Murali, any insights from you from the
Yeah, so let me go back to the previous question just for a moment. When I said look within, that was specifically to growing leaders from within the organization. Of course, we look outside all the time for people who come in at the lower levels. I don't think we have a choice. We have to, and that's something that we do. As far as cross-sector is concerned, we consciously hire cross-sector in certain areas because we want to bring, for example, when we look for, let's say, people who craft solutions for our clients, and I'm looking at, let's say, BFSI as an industry, I'd certainly want to have people who understand the BFSI sector, who worked in the BFSI sector, or for that matter, manufacturing. So for us to be able to get talent from those industries, bring a perspective that is a business-oriented outlook rather than necessarily a technology-oriented outlook. And because we're crafting technology solutions to get that perspective of industry is something that's very, very important. So we do have positions in our industry verticals that we definitely look at people coming in from cross-sector industries. And I think we'll continue to do that. If anything, we will continue to enlarge that because more and more specificity is required when we talk to clients. We have to show an understanding a client's business in a way in which we didn't need to earlier. People don't buy technology solutions for the sake of buying technology solutions anymore. They buy technology solutions when it addresses a business problem, a business outcome. And for us to be able to understand those business outcomes and those business problems and what the industry is thinking and to be able to respond to that, we need that thought to come in from outside.
Sure.
David, can I add to what we and others have said?
Sure.
Yeah. So I just reflecting on my organization also, and also across the industry, right? Hiring the leadership from outside or from within. I realized that the organizations typically having a lot of legacy, you would have a bench strength. In HR we call it what's the kind of a bench strength that you have. And if you have a greater bench strength, obviously you would be ready to replace the leader in case of eventuality, if the leader moves out or moves into the newer role within the organization. So you have a bench which essentially allows you to move the next person to the role. Talk about my organization, that I represent. It's about 50 years old organization, and I have a significant bench strength if you talk about investment bank or the capital market business. So I can foresee even if 3 CEOs leave, I still can replace them from people within. But there are businesses which have been introduced and built over last about decade or so. If any leader goes, I don't have a bench which is ready to take that job now. 5 years from now, yes. 10 years from now, yes. So I'm going to be forced to hire people from outside. So the situations could vary from situation to situation, businesses to business, newer businesses, or I've hired people as IT leaders because I did not have the next person. So it's an exigency. So obviously all the organizations that we are in, we would prefer growth from within, right? Why would you go outside if you have somebody within your organization ready? What is going to happen? You bring somebody, he is going to leave, right? Because that happens, right? You get a new leader, people think I should have probably been considered for that role. So you need to manage even the induction of external leadership into your system very carefully. And leadership is not an overnight story, right? It takes time. And as earlier we spoke of, accountability, responsibility is fine, but also how is he going to demonstrate his leadership? He might come from a very different school of thought, his style of working could be different, your organization culture could be very, very different. And as often said, that culture can have strategy for whatever, breakfast or whatever. But yeah, so I think culture can really give even a good talent a run for his money. And then to that extent, one is to be very, very careful. We also talked about cross-functional movements. See, I have moved from HR to business, right? I'm running a business now. I'm running a P&L for about 5-6 years. But that was possible or easier within the organization, right? And the organization knew me or what possibly I could do and demonstrate, and then they could take. So it's easier to take a bet on somebody internal, right? Because you're known the person. Of course, there are the softer skills, as we said, and the hard skills, right? And there is a balance between the two. And people can basically, be dealt with like. So, it has been an internal as well as external story for us. Also, we talked about the great resignation. Also, along with it, we should talk about greater infant mortality, right? And see, if you see, there are a lot of people who are leaving organization, and then many of them leave because the guy who was sitting next to the desk has left and got a salary increase of maybe 50 or 100%, and then the person who is sitting here feels undervalued, and he also kind of leaves. All probability, half of them would call you back that he's uncomfortable, wants to come back, and that has happened with us. So there are a lot of people who are not able to also adjust to the newer environment, or the organizations which are hiring in euphoria getting surprised. So there are people, the organizations have essentially reacting in terms of building the capacity and then hiring. At the same time, there is a significant reduction in the tolerance over the performance. And then we are going through an interesting time. I think we should see the normalcy soon. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Anil. I mean, I completely understand that aspect of people moving within and moving into a business role and all this stuff. Having experienced Big Four for the last 14 years, I've got 6 roles. Almost every 2.5 years we keep moving, and they had been encouraging. I mean, so I completely understand what you meant. Sumit, you wanted to add a point on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the observations which I must share that is that which I call a coterie creation, which when to me, in my view, functions are agnostic, sector agnostic, and somewhere the leaders, the promoters, they also need to open up their mind, that this is, if we are hiring a human resource or a finance or a supply chain in this individual, at the end of it, more or less the work is similar. It's the nature of business that people to need to understand. It's the marriage of convenience that creates a problem. When you look at hiring at junior level, mid-management, I think still there is a bit of flexibility, but as soon as it comes to a CXO or CXO -1, suddenly the the preference becomes, okay, I need someone who knows this business. I know someone who knows this business and has spent 10 years in this business. And 10 years, 3 years in absolutely similar nature. What are we trying to do exactly, right? The Kohinoor is not in India at the end of it. So fundamentally, some sort of flexibility has to come in, and ask any of our executive search partners who are here, they will say the same thing. That's the brief they get. So at times when I get the brief from our leaders, I say very clearly, look, if it is a sales role, I will still consider similarity. Other than that, please explore. At least talk to people. Once you talk to people, you will get to know there is a world where beyond the world that you have created on your own.
There's an interesting point that you have made about finding a person and then making him successful in that role. I mean, would you like to share an example of it? I mean, any one of you, I mean, we're just under 2 minutes, but if there's one example where it has worked wonderfully well in your organization and for yourself, taking a call wherein you trusted the individual and his capabilities for having spent in the system, and you have given different role to the individual.
So, my own example is there, right? So I run a business, and I must be doing a decent job because I'm running the same for last 5 years. Also, there is another business which we started at the same time 5 years ago. We started housing finance business, and that responsibility was given to our CFO. And he's done a marvelous job. Yeah, so he's actually moved from being, he's also double hatting like me. But I think the book that he's now running is about 1,200 to 1,500 crores. So I think he will move into that role full time, about 600 odd employees. I have hired about 400 employees for my business, and pretty successful experiences and experiments that we have done.
I think everybody's spoken about moving functions, and I'm a relative new entrant to the IT industry. I've been in the IT industry since 2002. Prior to that, variety of other things. So somebody actually made a leap of faith when they hired me in this organization, to the point that you're making, because I had no relevant experience in IT whatsoever. And I was also being hired for sales, right? And sales, coming from an industry that's completely unrelated to IT, was a big leap of faith. It did well. I mean, I did well in that first stint, and that then gave the opportunity. So I've spent 30 years in IT sales, solutions, pre-sales. 4 years back, somebody said, look, we have a big merger coming up. I want somebody from business to run HR. Are you game for it? So now 4 years I've been in HR. Again, it was a leap of faith. And I've enjoyed every bit of that experience. So I think the point being that if you do need to make that leap of faith, it is required for that belief, and that goes to not industry-specific skills, it goes not to your prior experience, but it goes to somebody assessing you for who you are, what you're capable of, and that should stand as the test for making that choice. And if you can exhibit that, then you should get that job, irrespective of which industry you come from. So it's paid off for me when somebody made a leap of faith. So
thank you so much for that one, and thank you so much, everyone. I mean, you had been brilliant in the way you had been answering questions. We'll take a pause here. Anyone from the group who would like to ask a question or put forward any question to the panel here? It's over there. No, we have one person who's raised.
Can we please pass on the microphone?
Thank you so much. Panelists, I think it was a great and very insightful conversation. My question is to Sumit. I think you talked a lot about the inorganic integration that has happened in your organization, and also the pre-post-COVID, how there's so much of a cultural difference that is built in, especially with the new hires coming in and with the great resignation that has struck. Any best practices you or anybody would like to share on some of those things that you have implemented on the ground to curb this difference that has been created, and that's very visible for us?
Right. Yeah. So I can tell you what we did during this phase. Obviously, digitalization of HR is one thing. What we did, all this onboarding process, if you see, it's a very mundane process that I'm talking about. Day one used to take some 4.5 hours, whenever you join. We have fully digitized it. It takes now 30 minutes to close the induction, etc. Apart from that, what we have done is that there is a 30, 60, 90-day catch-up with the new person who is joining in, that's one. Second, there are check-ins by the manager, by the skip level and by the leadership team members throughout the month. These are once in a month check-in that is mandatory for that, and also a cross-functional check-in. The buddy, that is very important, and the leadership team actually looks at the inputs, insights that have been received on that. We have called a program called New Hire Assimilation, which has been brought in, and New Hire Assimilation obviously has these two elements which I spoke about communicating with the person, but also the HR partner of the area meets and talks with these people in terms of understanding if they have understood the role better or not. So incidentally, the infant attrition for us has been 0 in the last 2 years because of that, and we have really we have increased our workforce by at least 20% on that. So this social touch is the basis on which we have designed these programs, and they are continuing. So these are the steps we have taken.
So let me add something quickly to this. As I said, I came into the HR role about 3 to 4 years back when we were going through a big merger, big integration that was happening within the entity world. Actually, there were 2 big integrations. One, there were about 28 group companies that were coming together, and then there was one in India, which was a large company in India, very well known, called NetMagic, which was integrating with entity. One is a completely entrepreneurial organization with phenomenal growth over the last 10 years. The other is a completely process-driven, large conglomerate, again with incredible growth over the last 10 years. And as you can imagine, there's tremendous difference in culture between the 2 companies. Right? In one, decisions are far easier, far quicker, and the other decision take a little bit more time. One's got, everything quickly goes up to the CEO takes a decision in that. In the other, you have to go through multiple steps before you can take a decision. But what we realized, in order for us to come together quickly, seamlessly, the biggest block were inequities in HR policies and programs. So we quickly came together to ensure that the inequities that existed were kind of brought together, leveled as quickly as possible, and wherever it did not have a significant financial impact for the company at this point in time. That was one thing that we did, made sure that everybody saw everything in one light. The second, equally if not more importantly, was to get away from people addressing each other as them and us. I mean them and this is that organization, this is this organization. The legacy NetMagic or the legacy Dimension Data, these legacies, words like these were really coming in the way because it was creating an artificial barrier. So we made a very conscious effort to ensure that there was no difference that was called out either by behavior or by word that called the 2 companies as being separate, but everybody got to see it as one. Still work in progress after a couple of years. It's not that easy because the people element, the emotions attached to some of these things are very, very different. We have a different titling and role mapping, very different from what they have. So I'm still saying they consciously, but that's the kind of thing that you typically find. The culture is the biggest block. Everything else is addressable, but to get culture together is where the challenge lies, and if you can crack that, and for that the biggest way is for the HR and the leadership team to stay very connected, very close, and a lot of the things that you spoke about, Sumit, were also the kinds of things that we did, to stay engaged, to stay connected, to be responsive, to listen more than anything else. Right? So.
Thank you so very much for that, and I'm afraid that's all the time we have on this session, but may I request all of you to please put your hands together for our panelists and our moderator, and to thank them personally, may I please request the kind presence of Mr. Ankit Bansal to join us on stage and present each of them with a token of our appreciation. And we love that our audience wants to engage more. We will break for a networking short tea break where we can exchange ideas, pass comments, have a one-on-one, but let us once again put our hands together as we thank each of our panelists. I'd like to take this opportunity by thanking each of them. Thank you so very much, Mr. Murali. It's been a pleasure listening in to those experiences that you shared with us. A round of applause for him, please. Let's also thank Mr. Sumit Neogi. Thank you so very much, sir, for joining us. Of course, a round of applause for our moderator as well, Mr. David Madhu, for balancing out and getting so many views from our diverse panelists right here. A round of applause for Ms. Pande as we take this moment by thanking her. I promise you fantastic tea and coffee right after this, so let's hear it up for our panelists once again. Let's also thank Mr. Anil Salvi for joining us. And may I request all of you to please inch closer for a group picture. We'd love to request Ms. Bansal to share the frame with you, please.